Give me a moment. Here we go. And let's do that. Okay, so can you all hear me? Can you all see the screen? Yeah, wave if you can, wave if it's okay. Good, fantastic. Okay, so welcome again. And this week we're going to talk about Istanbul. And I've called my lecture The Eternal City because it's the city that seems to stretch back into history and to continue to reinvent itself into the future. It's going to be possibly slightly longer than the other lectures. I realized in putting it together, I actually have quite a lot of material on Istanbul, and there's a lot to talk about. So forgive me if it goes on 5 minutes longer than usual. I'll try not to sort of drag, but I don't want to rush it and to skip too quickly over it. So bear with me if you may. If you do need to go off and have supper or whatever, then of course that's fine. Just switch off and we'll see you next week. So Istanbul. It was for over 1,000 years the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire from 330 AD until 1453, when it was besieged by a 21-year-old from the House of Osman and finally defeated by the Ottomans. The conqueror was known in Turkish as Fatih Sultan Mehmed, better known in the Western world as Mehmed the Conqueror, who became the first sultan to reign over the city. The Ottomans made it their capital then, and it remained so until 1920 and the dissolution of the Ottoman Parliament by the Allies just after the First World War. Notably, though, of course, it is not the capital of modern Turkey. The capital today is Ankara, having been selected as the capital of the modern republic by Ataturk in 1923. Over the centuries, the city has been known as, firstly, Byzantium, after its foundation by Megarian colonists in the 7th century BC, and that name is thought to derive from a personal name, Bizas. It was, of course, renamed to Constantinople by Constantine the Great when he made it the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire in 330 AD, and then it changed its name again to Istanbul in 1453 with the coming of the Ottomans. And the word Istanbul derives, we are told, from the medieval Greek istin polin, meaning to the city. It has an official population of 15 million, but the real figure is probably more likely 20 million, which means that something like 1/6 of Turkey's entire population live in this city today. It also has, of course, a unique geography, being the only city in the world that spans 2 continents, Europe and Asia. So let's start off then by just having a look at the map and reminding ourselves of the geography of where Istanbul is located. So here in the top left-hand corner of the map is, of course, Europe. This little piece here is Turkey, still Turkey, and then we have Greece and Romania, sorry, Bulgaria. And then here down in the bottom right-hand corner, of course, is Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey. In the bottom left-hand corner, of course, is the Mediterranean Sea. This part is the Aegean. In the top right is the Black Sea, and joining the two, between the two, we have the Sea of Marmara. These are the Dardanelles, the Straits of the Dardanelles that famously Byron supposedly swam. Gallipoli is on the shore here. And then Istanbul here on the shores of the Bosphorus joining the Sea of Marmara with the Black Sea. Let's zoom in a little bit to give you a little bit more of an idea. So here you can see, as I said, the Bosphorus dividing Europe on the left-hand side and Asia on the right-hand side here. Just to give you some idea of distance, of scale, from the very westernmost tip, of Istanbul down to the southeasternmost tip, the distance is something like 80 miles. So it's quite a vast city. It has grown phenomenally in the last 20 years, even more so in the last 10 years. And it is now one of the 10 largest cities in the world. Just while we're on this map, you'll notice the airport up here in the top left-hand corner. This, of course, is the new Istanbul airport, which was opened just 18 months ago. Again, the project for this is to become the largest airport in the world. The plan, Turkey's plan, is that Turkish Airlines should become a global airline, and Istanbul should become the hub for all of it. You can see that it's located right out in the countryside. This forestry all around here, and it's about 30 miles distant from the center of Istanbul. But nevertheless, this, of course, is where you're likely to arrive if you fly into the city. There is actually one other airport down here in the south, but less served by international flights. However, despite the enormous size of Istanbul, one of the really nice things about it for the visitor is that 90% of the things that you probably want to see are all concentrated within a very small area. And that is this little area here. So I'm going to zoom in and show you that. So just to get our bearings, here on the right-hand side, this again is the Asian shore. We have the Bosphorus here, and on the left-hand side, we have both of these. This is the European side of Istanbul. And this bit here usually goes by the name of Sultan Ahmet. You can see Google has flagged up a hotel here, the Boss Hotel, which I have no idea what it is, Boss Hotel, Sultan Ahmet. And this was the old center of Byzantium. It was the center of Constantinople. It was also the center of the Ottoman city. So if you like, all of the historical places of the city are concentrated in 2 or 3 square miles here, which means that it's very easy to explore. Everything is within 300 or 400 meters of walking distance once you are in Sultanahmet. Slightly confusing for the first time visitor to Istanbul, this stretch of water here is known as the Golden Horn. It is a river that flows into the Bosphorus, and it divides Sultanahmet with the Galata district of Istanbul. Galata district, sometimes also known as the Pera district. Historically, it was known as the Pera district. Some of you might remember that Agatha Christie, when she was writing her novel, Murder on the Orient Express, she stayed in Pera Palace Hotel up in Pera here. That was the other alternative name for it. And this part of Istanbul historically was the place where the Europeans lived, by which I mean very often they were the Venetians, the Genoese, the French. The Armenians also had some banks here, and also, of course, the English. So it's where you tend to find the embassies of these modern European countries are over on this shore here. But as I say, back in Sultanahmet is the concentration of the historical Istanbul or Constantinople, whichever you prefer to call it. So I'm just going to start off with a couple of views, just to give some idea of how all this looks when you are on the ground. And first off is a photograph that I took from a ferry coming from the Asian side up into the mouth of the Bosphorus, and then the ferry was going to dock in the quayside here, and just so taken from somewhere here, and you get a very beautiful view of, so this is all Sultanahmet here. So we'll go into more detail about what these mosques are that you can see on the horizon with their minarets puncturing the sky. So this one here is the Blue Mosque. We've got Nur Osmaniye Mosque here, which is near to the Covered Bazaar. This is the Hagia Sophia, Süleymaniye Mosque, and this is the Church of Sant'Irene here. You can also make out the walls here. These are the old city walls of the Byzantine Constantinople, and I'll show you some more photos of those in a little while. It's quite rare to arrive in Istanbul by boat. As I said, most people arrive by air, but if you can arrive by boat, you're greeted with this beautiful spectacle. I think it is certainly one of the world's greatest sights. These ferries plying backwards and forward across the Bosphorus, been in service for probably 60 or 70 years. I think nowadays most of them, unfortunately, are retired. I think this photograph was actually taken about 8 or 9 years ago. So here's another view. Here I'm actually standing probably on the top of the Galata Tower here, and I'm looking out over the Golden Horn and to Sultanahmet. And this is what it looks like. So the Golden Horn is not terribly wide. You'll notice lots and lots of boats. Some of these are tour boats, some of them are ferry boats, and so forth. You'll notice this bridge. This is relatively modern bridge built in the last 20 years. And you'll notice, of course, as ever, the horizon punctured by the minarets of mosques. And you'll also notice just how closely packed in the buildings are. In this part of Istanbul, in Sultanahmet, they're not terribly high. There's no skyscrapers in Sultanahmet. Great contrast to some of the rest of modern Istanbul. And if I now imagine that I cross over the bridge and standing somewhere over here, I turn around and take a photograph in the opposite direction, this is what you would see. So this is the Galata Tower that I mentioned. This was a lookout tower built by the Genovese back in the 12th century. Nowadays, quite a lot of modern apartments, built in the last 50 or 60 years, rather, I should say. But nevertheless, an interesting site. Just going back to my view from the top of the Galata Tower, just trying to identify some of the sites that you see. So just over the bridge across the Golden Horn is a very beautiful mosque called Yeni Cami, which means the new mosque. It's not actually new, it's an 18th century mosque. It's very pretty. We won't really talk about it today, but it's certainly very nice. Nur Osmaniye Jami is the one that I mentioned, is the one near to the covered bazaar. But the two that will interest us, certainly for the extent of this talk, are the Blue Mosque here and Hagia Sophia, which is this one here. Nowadays, it is a mosque. You'll notice the minarets here, but of course it started out life as a church, and we'll come to talk about that in just a moment. Just one more similar view, just allowing the camera to pan round a little bit to the left. So again, the Blue Mosque, Hagia Sophia here. This time you can also see Topkapı. Talk about Topkapı. Topkapı was the palace of the Ottoman sultans. And the other thing I should point out in this photograph, you can also see some land. These are the Prince's Islands in the Sea of Marmara. This here is the Asian shore, and this, of course, is the Bosphorus here. So let's dive in and start to talk a little bit of detail about some of the fabulous buildings that you would want to go and visit in a trip to Istanbul. And let's start off by visiting the Hagia Sophia here. Now, it is without a doubt one of the most famous buildings in Istanbul. It's also one of the oldest. It was built in 537 AD as the Patriarchal Cathedral of Constantinople. And it was built by the Roman Emperor Justinian. Of course, in those days, it wasn't a mosque. These minarets did not exist, so you can pretend they weren't there. It was designed by an architect from Miletus down in what is nowadays southwestern Turkey, Isidore of Miletus. And he was Greek. The dome, it was the huge achievement of the time because it is 32.6 meters in diameter and less than 1 meter thick, something like 60 centimeters thick. It's an astonishing architectural achievement. And at the time that it was built, it was the largest dome in the world, and also the interior space of the church was the largest interior space of any building in the world. Unfortunately, during the 500s, it suffered from several earthquakes, which damaged the dome. It had to be rebuilt by Isidore's nephew. And then it suffered further damage in the 10th century. Again, earthquake damage, I think fire damage as well. And it was repaired by an Armenian architect by the name of Trat, who was also the architect of Ani, if you cast your minds back to our lecture on Armenia a few weeks ago. And it was during these restructurings that some of these buttresses were added to give extra strength to the church to support this fabulous dome. Then it underwent further renovation in the 19th century by a couple of Italian-Swiss architects, Gaspare and Giuseppe Fossati, two brothers, who were mainly responsible for renovating the interior of the church. By this time, of course, After 1453, after the arrival of the Ottomans, it had been converted into a mosque. And it was at that time that these big roundels were added. These are the names of Allah and prophets. It remained as a mosque until 1935, when it was converted into a secular museum by Ataturk. And it remained as a secular museum until just this year, actually, when it was converted back once again into a mosque. This photograph of the interior of Hagia Sophia actually is a few years old, but it's the best one I could find. For the last 10 years, it has been undergoing further renovations, and there was scaffolding in the whole of the interior. This photo is about 10 years old. In fact, I think they're just beginning to put the scaffolding up. You can just see it down at the bottom here. But it's an interesting photo for one detail, if I can draw your attention to it. Down here, you will see a circle of stone. This floor that you can see in this photograph is the same floor that was of the church back at the time it was built. It's a marble floor, except for this circle, which is porphyry. And this circle of porphyry denoted the place where the emperor sat. And you might well remember when we talked about the cathedral in Monreale, the beautiful Norman churches in Sicily, the Norman kings took this idea from the Byzantine emperors of having a circle of porphyry and using that to denote the place where the throne was, where the king was, or actually where the emperor was. So that's where it comes from. It comes from the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. So nowadays, as I say, it's been turned into a mosque. I gather, I haven't been in there since it's turned into a mosque. I gather the floor has now been carpeted once again. So the other hugely important feature of Hagia Sophia, particularly when we look at it as a Byzantine church, is the fabulous Byzantine decorations, in particular the wonderful mosaics which are here. And most of these mosaics are in the galleries here. If you look carefully, you can see some people standing in these galleries. There's some here, a few more here, and a few more here. Almost certainly they are admiring the mosaics which are on the walls here. Now, when the church was converted to a mosque in 1453, fortunately for us, these mosaics were plastered over, and it was in the 19th century the Fossati brothers who uncovered these mosaics. So that's why they've remained in such good condition. So the first mosaic I want to show you, this you'll recognize this, is the Christ Pantocrator. Very similar to all intents and purposes to the ones we see in Monreale and Cefalù and so forth. This one dates from the 12th century. It's widely regarded as the finest of all the mosaics in Hagia Sophia, and it was put in to commemorate a time when, for a short period, I should step aside a moment here, for a short period during the Fourth Crusade, Hagia Sophia was actually turned also into a Roman Catholic church by the Venetian Crusaders. And this mosaic is to commemorate its return to the Orthodox Church. Just another aside, when the Venetians turned it into a Catholic church, they also sacked the city of Constantinople and took many of the great treasures back to Venice, including, and this is also the connection with Sicily, the body of Saint Lucy, who, as you'll remember, she died in Syracuse in Sicily. She had been brought by Byzantine generals from Syracuse to Constantinople to be kept in the Hagia Sophia for safekeeping, but her body was then taken by the Venetians to Constantinople, to Venice, sorry, and that's where she is today. So poor old St. Lucy, she's had a very itinerant life even after her death, but that's to explain it as well. Another beautiful mosaic. This is depicting the Byzantine emperors, or rather an emperor and his wife, the empress, either side of Christ. In this particular one, in fact, this is the Emperor Constantine Monomachus and the Empress Zoe. Constantine Monomachus is giving to Christ a donation of a sack, probably of money, whereas the Empress Zoe is giving to Christ the deeds of the church. Just as a little aside, if you have some time, it's quite fun to look up the life of Empress Zoe. She led quite an extraordinary life. Before I tell you about that, though, one thing you might notice is that quite probably these faces have been put in afterwards. Can you see? It's as if they've been touched in afterwards. This was a common thing that happened. The mosaic stayed the same. The inscription would change and the faces would change with the emperor or the empress. But in Zoe's case, it had to change because Constantine Monomachus was her third husband. So Empress Zoe, she was first married to Romanos III, but then in 1034, Romanos III was found dead in his bath. The same day, Zoe married her lover Michael, and the following day, Michael was crowned emperor, Emperor Michael IV. Things didn't stop there, because in order to keep Zoe out of politics, Michael then consigned her to a gynoeceum, which is a kind of nunnery, and he ruled himself. While in the nunnery, she was forced to adopt the nephew of her previous husband. And then when her husband Michael died, her nephew then became the emperor. He was also called Michael and became Michael V. He further banished Zoe, this time to a monastery on the Prince's Islands. Luckily, though, for Zoe, she was an extremely popular, apparently she was a very beautiful lady, she was a very popular empress. And the people of Constantinople revolted and Zoe was brought back. She was reinstated as empress and she married for the third time Constantine Monomachus. She ruled over as empress together with her sister Theodora. So there were three of them ruling over Byzantium. And just to throw a little bit extra into the mix, Constantine also brought to this marriage his long-standing mistress, Maria Scleriana, to live at the court with them. So quite a lively time back in the 11th century. The next mosaic dates from the 12th century, not such colorful times maybe. This is the Emperor Comnenus and his wife, the Empress Irene. And they are standing either side, of course, the Virgin Mary and the young figure of Christ. Another lovely mosaic is over the imperial gate. This was the doorway through which the emperor would have entered the Hagia Sophia. And it depicts obviously Christ and an emperor bowing down before Christ. Tantalizing, we can't identify this emperor. We don't know quite who it is. And one final beautiful mosaic from the Hagia Sophia is this one here, which depicts Constantine, the founder of the city of Constantinople, donating a model of the city to the Virgin Mary. And here on the left-hand side is the Emperor Justinian donating a model of the Hagia Sophia to the Virgin as well. The other thing that you'll notice in this picture, I think, if you look carefully, is this beautiful marble decoration down here. This is something you see a lot in the Hagia Sophia, and it's made by slicing a slab of marble down the middle, vertically down the middle, and then opening it up as if it were a book, so that you get these fabulous symmetrical patterns. Really astonishing and very, very beautiful, particular to the Hagia Sophia. Okay, well, let's move on. There's still plenty to see. The next slide, I think, is a view, if you like, of how Constantinople would have looked in 1200 AD. Not incredibly changed from today. We can recognize this is the Hagia Sophia here. This is where the Byzantine court palace would have been. This would have been parkland here. And this, we haven't mentioned this is the Hippodrome, still there today. Nowadays, of course, we have the Blue Mosque here, and we have the Topkapi Palace here. But to all intents and purposes, it's more or less much the same. But what you can't see in this picture is underground, because when we go and we look above ground, we see the beautiful mosques, we see the beautiful churches, but underground Istanbul also reveals some incredible secrets, because it is filled with these astonishing cisterns, these underground cisterns, and they're built rather like an underground cathedral. And of course their use was to hold water. The water was brought to the city of Constantinople via a huge aqueduct, some of which are still standing today, and then filled up these cisterns. Of course, in old days, these would have been filled with water. Nowadays, there's just a meter or so of water in the bottom. You can go and visit them. There are walkways through them, and there is lighting there to light them up. They're astonishing things, and they're really very, very beautiful. Quite difficult to photograph, and I don't have great photographs of them, I'm afraid. Still staying with the Byzantines for the moment. Still standing is the old city wall of Byzantium, or Constantinople, if you like. Originally built by the Romans and then reinforced in later years. And this, of course, is the wall that the Ottomans had to breach in order to conquer the city. This is on the western side of the city. And I put in this picture because, so let's go back to our map for a moment. So the wall goes all the way around the outside, of course, on the shore, but the city wall goes somewhere like this across. I don't know exactly where, can't see exactly, but somewhere like that. So that is where this particular photograph is taken. And now I want to take you outside the city walls. This is the only thing that we'll see for the time being outside that couple of square miles of Sultanahmet, to the beautiful Kora church. Now, Kora in Greek means village or countryside. And in fact, this Kora church in Byzantine times was outside the city walls. It was in the countryside. It is a medieval Greek church, and it is one of the finest remaining Greek Orthodox churches that we have, not only in Constantinople, but in the world anywhere. There'd been a church on this site from the 4th century AD, but most of the present building dates from about the 11th century AD. It contains some of the finest Byzantine frescoes and mosaics extant anywhere in the world, such as this one here. This is the resurrection. This is Christ in the middle. He has broken down the gates of hell, and he is pulling Adam and Eve out of their tombs. Behind him stands John the Baptist, Solomon, and other righteous kings. Then here in another dome we have, this is the Last Judgment. Christ here is surrounded by John the Baptist, the Virgin Mary, the apostles here. He's judging the souls. Here are the souls in purgatory, waiting to be judged, and some of them being cast down into hell down here on the right-hand side. Quite an extraordinary picture, this one. Also some beautiful domes, more beautiful frescoes inside the domes. This is the Virgin Mary surrounded by angels and archangels. We have here, these are of course mosaics, the Christ Pantocrator, surrounded here by, I think most of these are elders of the Old Testament, and also the Virgin Mary surrounded by, these are various Byzantine saints and emperors and empresses. Really an incredible catalogue of Byzantine art. And just very, very finally, of course, there's also same kind of thing over the entrance is another beautiful mosaic. This is a depiction of, you can see his name here, actually here, Theodoro Metochites. He was a Byzantine statesman, and he's presenting a model of the of the Kora church to Christ. Just a few months ago, actually, literally a couple of months ago, Kora church has actually been turned into a mosque. They've promised they're going to keep everything as it is. Nothing is going to be touched. I haven't visited it since. I don't know how it is, but hopefully it will remain just like this. Let's leave the Byzantines now because there's still a lot to talk about. I want to go on and talk a little bit about the Ottomans. So as I said, the Ottomans conquered Constantinople in 1453 under Sultan Mehmed. And the first thing that he did was to build a new palace for himself. And it would also come to be for all of the Ottoman sultans right up to the 19th century. That palace was named Topkapı. It's a huge palace, requires at least half a day to visit it. Really, I can really can't give you an idea of it, the grandeur of it. This is a view from the Bosphorus here. These, you can see here, these are the chimneys of the kitchens. The kitchens are just enormous. There are 4 huge courtyards. Each of them could be a palace in its own right. And then these kiosks dotted round about where the sultans could come and sit and admire the Bosphorus. Here's another view from the Bosphorus looking over into Topkapi. This here is one of the 2 gateways into Topkapi Palace. And then, so as I say, any visit requires at least half a day. There's a huge museum in there to see as well. There's all kinds of treasures of Islam, including pieces of Muhammad's beard, Muhammad's sword. There's some beautiful jewels as well. All the jewels of the sultans are there as well. But of course, I think one of the most interesting things to see is the harem. The harem, of course, was where the sultan himself lived, so he lived there with his mother, and also, of course, with his wives, and with his concubines, his mistresses, and the slaves. Slaves tended to be Negro African slaves, and of course, all of them were eunuchs. And so the harem is simply a succession of room after room like this. You can imagine the sultan sitting on one of these beautiful divans with these braziers in front of him, heating away, with poetry, music, concubines, food, and so on and so forth. Really difficult to give you an idea with just photographs, but just look at the beautiful tiled work which decorates the entire inner space of the Topkapi Palace. These tiles, predominantly blue, are produced in a town called Iznik, not very far from Istanbul, and still famous today for producing these tiles. And of course, beautiful calligraphy. This is not Arabic. This is the Ottoman language. In other words, it's Turkish, but the Ottoman language was written using the Arabic script. So it's very difficult. Very few people can read it these days, because even if you know Arabic, it doesn't help you. You need to know Ottoman. Some more lovely, beautiful, of course, they're all geometric designs, similar to some of the ones that we see, for example, in Sicily. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to move on. I know I shouldn't, but I will, because otherwise we will never get to the end. Just a short stone throw away, a couple of 100 meters away from Topkapi Palace, is the Blue Mosque, which is undoubtedly the most famous of the mosques in Sultanahmet. In fact, its proper name is the Sultanahmet Mosque because it was designed, or built rather, commissioned for Sultanahmet at the beginning of the 17th century. You can go inside, you can visit it. It's very impressive, and very, very beautiful. I have to say, though, I don't think it's the most impressive mosque in Istanbul. I think that accolade has to be reserved for Süleymaniye Mosque, which, if I go to back to our map, if I can just find our map. So Blue Mosque is here. Süleymaniye Mosque is just over here. So it's still within the confines of the city walls, but about half an hour's walk across the city to arrive at the Süleymaniye Mosque, which is this one here. So this water here, this is the Golden Horn here. I'm taking this photograph from a ferry on the Golden Horn. Here's another view, a little bit more in close up, and another one here. Again, this is the bridge across the Golden Horn. Now, Süleymaniye Mosque was built in the 16th century, so it predates the Blue Mosque. It was built during the reign of Sultan Süleyman. So really, this was the apogee of the Ottoman Empire. And it was designed by the imperial architect Sinan. He was known as Mimar Sinan. Mimar in Turkish means architect, so he was the architect Sinan. He is an extraordinary person. Some of you may have read the novel by Elif Shafak about his life. We think that he was born around 1490 in the village of Arnas in Kayseri, which is over in the east of Turkey. He was either Armenian or Cappadocian Greek, but he was certainly Christian. He was not Muslim. But nevertheless, he is renowned for the finest Muslim architecture in not just Istanbul. The other great building that he built was Edirne, the beautiful mosque there. So here we are in the interior of the Süleymaniye Mosque. It's possibly a little bit plainer than the Blue Mosque, but yet the symmetry of it is utterly stunning. Until 2 years ago, it was the largest mosque in Istanbul. Until President Erdogan, he's built a new mosque on the Asian shore, which is larger than this one. Here we are inside it again. This is our guide, Deria, explaining to us about the history of us. And one of the stories that she tells, which I'd like to just recount to you, is utterly extraordinary, I think. This mosque had its own air conditioning system, not electrical air conditioning put in the 20th century, but from the 16th century. And so the cool air would enter the mosque at ground level, and then it would, of course, rise and it would go out through air vents at the top. And to prove that this all worked, one of the extraordinary facts is if you imagine in the past, all of these lights would have been not electric lights, but they would have been candles. The candles would emit a small amount of smoke. The smoke would drift upwards in the currents of this air conditioning system, and it would get trapped in the vents as it left the mosque. Scholars of the Quran would pay a very high price to collect the residue of or if you like, the soot or the smoke of the candles, which they used to make ink, and they would use that ink to write beautiful calligraphy or inscribe Quran using the ink of Süleymaniye Mosque. Outside, it has a huge complex known as a kulliye in Turkish, which included hospitals, schools, madrases, a hammam. These are the roofs of the hammam, a caravanserai, and also a public kitchen as well. This is looking over to Levent area, the modern district of Istanbul. You can see the extremely huge buildings in the distance. This is the Galata Tower note there. The next photograph is, again, this is looking out over Süleymaniye Mosque, to this time across the Bosphorus. And in fact, this is an interesting picture because this is the beginning of the construction site of President Erdogan's mosque, is somewhere up there. And just finally, some more beautiful tile work of Süleymaniye Mosque. So leaving mosques aside now, the last few minutes, if I may, just like to take you on a little bit more of a tour Undoubtedly, anybody that comes to visit Istanbul will want to go and walk around, go and visit the bazaars and do some shopping. There's always something lovely to eat wherever you go. This man here in his trolley is selling these round rings of bread known as simits, which you can always just buy to eat as you walk around. Through the bazaars, through the markets. But you'll notice in the middle of this picture, there's a guy selling these simit, these bread rings. He's walking around with a tray on the top of his head, so you can just stop him and ask him for one. This is inside the spice bazaar. I think everybody wants to go and visit the Grand Bazaar. To be quite honest, though, the Grand Bazaar unfortunately tends to sell a lot of, dare I say, sort of imports from China and so on these days. But the Spice Bazaar is certainly absolutely still very authentic, with these beautiful spices, soaps and so on lining the inside. These are sponges, some dried peppers hanging up here, all manner of things. These are different types of ground pepper. Are on sale here. Spicy peppers, some olive oil soaps here, some tea here. This is lime flower tea, cinnamon, and so on. You can buy absolutely any kind of tea or spice that you want to in the Spice Bazaar. Jasmine tea here, rose tea, and so forth. Apple tea, of course, is very popular in Turkey. And of course, when you're tired of just wandering around the bazaars and the mosques, you can just go and relax in one of these beautiful tea gardens, often with beautiful shade, these lovely lilac trees or so on, and just sit down and enjoy your tea or coffee. But undoubtedly, anybody will want to do also a tour up the Bosphorus. That's very easy to do. You simply go down to the quayside, Eminönü here, and jump onto one of these ferries, buy yourself a ticket, costs something like £3, hop on one of these ferries, and it will take you up the Bosphorus for the day. If you feel hungry before you go, there's always one of these guys on a, this is a sort of boat on the quayside. He's selling filleted mackerel, grilled mackerel, which you can put between some slices of bread and take with you. So on our trip up the Bosphorus, you can see this is a quite a famous Ottoman lighthouse. You can also see in the background, this is one of the 3 bridges that there are now across the Bosphorus. This particular one is the first one. You might just be able to see the second one in a shadow in the distance. But the lovely thing about the trip up the Bosphorus is that you get to go and see some of the mosques and the palaces that were built there during the 19th century by the Ottoman sultans. And also the lovely summer houses. Again, rich Istanbul people would have a summer house up here known as yaylas. They'd come and while away the summer up here. It's quite amazing to think that where we are here, we are just 10 miles up the Bosphorus from one of the world's largest and busiest cities. This is quite extraordinary. This is a fortress built by Fatih Sultan Mehmed in the year before he conquered Istanbul. He built 2. He built one on this side of the Bosphorus. This one is known as Rumeli Hisarı, the fortress on the side of Rum. And the other one is the Anadolu Hisarı. And they were built to gain control over the Bosphorus and cut off the shipping to the Byzantines. Extraordinary fact is that it was built in a single year, and I'm told that the mortar or cement used in the stonework was hardened with the albumen of pigeons' eggs to make it set harder. This here is the Dolmabahce Palace. This is actually the palace in the 19th century. The Ottoman sultans, they left Topkapi and they came to live in Dolmabahce, right on the shores of the Bosphorus. I have to admit, and this is the inside of it, I have to admit I find it slightly underwhelming compared to Topkapi, but nevertheless, this was, of course, the style of the time that they wanted to emanate. Finally, we haven't really said anything about other quarters of Istanbul. I briefly mentioned the quarter where the Genovese lived, the Venetians, the French, and so forth. And this was, as I think I briefly mentioned, was known as Galata. It was also known as Pera. And they, in the 19th century, produced some fabulous buildings here, but very typical of what you'd see anywhere else in Europe in the 19th century. Wandering a little bit further afield, this is in the area between Süleymaniye Mosque and Kora Church. I seem to have a lot of photographs of here because I've evidently spent a lot of time here. But this area, and it's under threat, I'm afraid, but this area, you can still find some of the traditional old Istanbul houses. So these houses date from the 18th, 19th centuries, all made of wood. There's very few of them left because a lot of them burnt down, unfortunately, and nowadays they are being knocked down and to make way for modern apartments. But nevertheless, very colourful, beautiful area, inhabited in the 19th century, a lot of the time by Greeks. This is a Greek school, I think, here, but a colourful area to wander around today. This building here is, this is a Greek girls' school dating from the 19th century. This is another view from the same area looking down over the Golden Horn. This is the tower of the girls' school. And this is, as I said, a lot of these buildings are being knocked down to make way for modern flats. Most of them are abandoned now, but you very much get the idea of how Istanbul might have been just even 50 years ago. And it's a fun area to walk around because you still come across, there are these beautiful Greek Orthodox churches every now and again. And you can still go inside them and they still have beautiful mosaics and frescoes, some of them. And finally, the last slide I want to show you, this is from the Princess Islands. I think I briefly mentioned in the Sea of Marmara. And this is where the Istanbul people like to go for their summer. Well, you can't really go for a summer holiday, but you might go for a summer weekend or something. And it's like stepping back into the 19th century. You'll see most of the traffic is horse-drawn carts. But I just wanted to show you this photograph to contrast it with this in the background is not even the center of Istanbul. This is the outskirts of Istanbul on the road down towards Ankara. But you'll just see lined with some of the most enormous skyscrapers. This is a city that has undergone enormous growth over the last 20 years. Well, I'm afraid that is a very much a whistle-stop tour of Istanbul, but I hope it's given you some idea of the kinds of things that you could go and see. So if you'd like to, Lara, if you'd like to unmute us, then and people want to ask a question, then by all means do wave your hand and put up your hand and so forth, shout out, and I'll do my best to answer.
I don't know, my iPad's not working.
I've got one question already from Jenny. Jenny is asking, what date are the frescoes? I think you mean the frescoes in the Kora church, and they date from the 12th century AD. So I hope that answers that question, Jenny.
Yeah. Thank you, Damien.
Good. Well, thank you for reminding me. I should have mentioned it.
You did get a lot in, Damien. You did manage to get a lot in there.
Well, I hope it wasn't too much.
Another quick question, Damien. That's all
Go
right.
ahead. Yes.
In the back of the mosaics, is it gold that's at the back of some of the mosaics?
Yes, it is.
You'll
Yes,
see?
it is.
Yes.
It's gold leaf. Yes,
Gold leaf.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
They've been cleaned up, of course, recently, because otherwise, of course, it particularly in the past when these churches were lit by candlelight, of course, the candles would emit smoke and it would cover it up. So most of those have been a little bit cleaned up, but it is absolute pure gold leaf. Yes.
Thank you.
Not at all.
Damien?
Yes, Hazel.
Does the, I can't pronounce it the way you do. I always say Hagia Sophia, you know.
That's all right. That'll do.
Does it have a crypt? Do those mosques have crypts?
Oh, goodness me, Hazel. I have no idea.
You've never gone there?
I've never been in one.
Okay.
I don't think it does. I don't think it does. I'm willing to stand corrected by somebody else. I just can't see how it could have a crypt. I can't see how it could stand up if there was a crypt underneath. But I don't know. I should find out. But as I say, I've never been in one.
But that sewer that you showed us had those Corinthian columns. Do you think they were salvaged from previous works?
Ah, good point. Yes, absolutely. I mean, and for sure they were salvaged. For sure they were reused. Yes. I mean, I didn't talk about this at all, but there is a fabulous archaeological museum in Istanbul. It's just in the gardens of Topkapı Palace, and you walk into this archaeological museum, and it is just strewn with columns and capitals, which have just, I mean, they've been culled from all over, from ancient Byzantium, as it were. And so, yes, of course, when they were building the cisterns, they would have reused whatever they could have. And in fact, I haven't got a picture of it, but there's a very famous one in that underground cistern, and it's an enormous capital. It's a depiction of the Medusa's head, and it's not used as a capital. It's used as a base of a column, and for to ward off the evil spirits, when they put it in upside down, so the Medusa couldn't cast her evil spell on the city, but it's still there. So they did reuse those. Absolutely. Good question. Thank you. Anybody else?
Do you think that they put that Medusa there on purpose to bury her, basically, to drown her?
Absolutely, they did. Yes, that's right. Yes, and because of course, nobody would have gone down in the cistern in those days.
It was there.
Yeah, they wouldn't have known it's there. It's only nowadays, when the water level is much lower, that you can go and see it. Yes, yeah.
You didn't mention the fabulous food, Damien, in Istanbul.
I didn't, did I? Yes.
A highlight of your trip there was just the different food every night was just fantastic.
We did eat rather well, didn't we? Yes, and I mean, that's the subject of another talk. I mean, Ottoman cuisine, or Turkish cuisine, is one of the great cuisines, of course, of the world. And the reason why it's such a great cuisine is it has such a wide variety of influences. I mean, there is, of course, the whole Mediterranean aspect, but then there's also all the ancient, the dumplings from China and so on and so forth. So yes, that's,
you did us proud.
Damien, it's Tina here.
Tina, nice to see you. Hi.
Nice, thank you. That was lovely. Just to say that there were also fish swimming in the cistern, and should you want a picture of the Medusa, my camera didn't get many good shots, but I did manage to get a picture of that. Should you want to add it for future reference.
Thank you, Tina. Yes, please send that to me because I do not have a photo of it. You're quite right about the fish swimming in the cistern. It was a way of keeping the water clean, apparently. So they say. Yes, they are. I mean, how these fish survived, I have no idea. But yeah.
I only remembered because I happened to get a picture of them, not because I have any sort of good memory.
Oh, right. Well done for getting a picture. I don't think I've got a picture at all of those. Yeah. Anyone else?
What else? The other question?
Well, if there are no more questions,
No.
I think I might go and start cooking my supper. And so
We'll go have our tea.
and for you in the North America, it's time for tea. Thank you all for joining us again.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Next week we are in Malta, so do join us, and we'll look forward to